And now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. And INSEAD MBA, the company he co-founded, took on the formidable task of launching metasearch here in the Indian travel marketplace. And beyond air, hotel, and car, this company delves into car rental, also buses, cabs, and trains. Please welcome the co-founder and CEO of ixigo, Mr. Aloke Bajpai. Thank you very much. Yeah, right there. A former management consultant, he manages growth for a company that turned carpooling into a company valued at $1.6 billion US. 25 million members, probably more right now, at least 22 countries. Please welcome the India country manager for another travel industry unicorn, BlaBlaCar, Mr. Raghav Gupta. Welcome. With roots in traditional car rentals, she's pivoted into a new sub-ground transport category called self-drive. And she's committed, as you heard yesterday, to change the way Indians buy cars. Please welcome the co-founder and CEO of Miles, Mrs. Sakshi Vij. Welcome. You realize a few years ago, a session on ground transport was unthinkable, right?
Yeah.
And people still refer to ground transport as a long tail, which is really kind of nonsense because it's enormous and the category is responsible for raising untold amount of money. So let's give the audience some background. I'm going to ask you, when was your company founded and how many employees, what markets? So you founded ixigo when?
We launched in 2007.
2007. You're like a veteran. And how many employees now?
We have 150 employees.
150, and you just serve India.
We just serve India.
And you're still calling yourselves Travel Metasearch, right?
We are Travel Metasearch,
okay. BlaBlaCar, you learned about them at INSEAD, right?
Mm-hmm.
In France.
So BlaBlaCar was founded in 2006. Yeah. About 500 employees now, headquartered out of Paris. And we're in 22 countries now.
I got that right. Sounds good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And launched in India in January last year. So it's been a little over a year since we've been in India.
And so you've been with BlaBlaCar for 1 year, or were you working in France?
I went to business school with some of the founders at INSEAD.
Nicholas?
So I've known them a
Nicholas?
while, but I was doing management consulting in the UK and in India before.
How many
BlaBlaCar.
employees now in India?
So India is managed by a team of about 50 people. Some of them are in India, and some of them are in some of the other offices in Europe as well.
And do you expect the same thing? So Uber is #2 market after the United States is India. Do you have those same expectations for BlaBlaCar?
Well, there was a media report out the other day which quoted our founder as saying India should be our #1 market. So
#1?
I don't know. So let's see. We'll see.
Where is it now? 22?
Well, not that
okay,
that
21,
low, but a little better.
21, okay.
Yeah, a little better.
Miles was founded when?
We were founded in November of 2013, so we're about 2.5 years old.
Yeah, and how many employees now?
About 150 people. Yeah.
So here's the thing I always try to figure out. So I've been in online travel, if you will, or tech and travel since '89, kind of dating myself. And as I said, ground transport and brands that could extend to multiple markets was absolutely unthinkable, right? So what I'm trying to get the audience to understand, what has changed, would you say, in the marketplace with trends and technology that's enabled just about any idea of subcategory to launch? How do you describe, like, why did you launch now and not 5-10 years ago?
Because there wasn't a market for it. I think for us, I've been part of Cars on Rent, which was, sort of the largest organized car rental firm, and they've been in the business for 16 years. And we used to represent Hertz in India. We tried multiple times to bring self-drive into India, and we always experienced a resistance.
Right. So when you say there wasn't a market, so what changed? What do you think changed?
I think the cost of car ownership changed. The cost of having a cab changed. The cost of a driver changed. The ability for people to take interstate trips on their own, and the kind of roadways that have been developed interstate have been changed. I think all of those things helped.
For all your businesses, though, How much do you think the Airbnb and Uber success factor kind of knocked down 1,000,000 barriers for all these other subcategories?
So I think in our case, I don't think, at least from an India perspective, I think the Airbnb or the Uber example are that relevant. I think in our case,
Are not relevant.
not relevant in India. I'm not talking for BlaBlaCar globally. I think for us, along with the macro factors of, smartphones and things like that, the reason peer-to-peer ride-sharing works is because before people travel in somebody else's car, they probably ask themselves two questions. Is this safe? Is it going to be pleasant? And to be able to ensure that this is going to be safe and pleasant, we have to be able to do a lot of things, which is about creating a trusted community.
You guys agree or disagree? Airbnb and Uber, did they help pave the way, or you don't think very relevant?
I think for the ground transportation category, Uber and Ola and definitely opened up the market here, right? So, I mean, from our perspective, the reason why we got into it was twofold. I mean, you need a meta when you have a lot of different choices, and you also have a lot of type of products, right? So if you look at the ground category, now you have not just taxis, you have bike taxis, you have shuttle, you have pooling, and you've got 5 different things that you can do now, which might not all come from the same provider. And when you have a situation like that, as a meta player, it's perfect opportunity.
When did Exego start ground transport?
We started working on the cabs product just about a year back. We launched it about 8-9 months ago.
So this is all new.
This is all new.
All new. Yeah. Here's why I think Airbnb and Uber did knock down a lot of barriers. It's less about the specifics. Prior to those two companies' successes, the thought of a consumer getting in a stranger's car or in a stranger's bed, to me, was unthinkable. And what these companies did by marrying technology with a marketplace effect is they changed the world. It's like how LinkedIn, right? Years ago, I'm dating myself, like if you were working on your resume, your CV, it was unthinkable. You never let anybody know. It was a secret. Now, if your LinkedIn profile isn't up to date, there's something wrong with you. I mean, it's a completely turned 180 degrees. So that's what I think, is that they've married technology to make the trust, because before, I'm not going to get in the bed or the car because some bad things could happen. Now, if the bad things can happen, I know who you are, where you are, where you are. I can click right out of the way. So that's why I think it's
and Philip, I would completely agree from a larger across-country perspective, but from a very India perspective, which is obviously a large market but a smaller perspective, I think the amount of people who've used an Airbnb service, a lot of it is outside India as opposed to within India so far. And also in India's case, an Uber or an Ola is still, you're getting into a taxi as opposed to getting into another person's car. So that's why I was getting into a little bit of the specifics, but yeah, at a global level versus an India-specific level,
Plus,
I see differences.
I also believe that from an Airbnb perspective, even though they're not as large, they're looking at being very large in India as well, moving forward. But I think there is a lot of learning that we were able to get, and a lot of the things that we are doing at Miles as well is about engaging with the consumer, making it asset light, getting people to share their cars, which is really the example of how Airbnb did by creating an ecosystem of accommodation.
Yeah.
And more than just like you said, I think it's important that what they were able to do was to engage with people at a level where there were conversations that were started about sharing.
So a next step, if we can draw parallels between alternate accommodations and various subsectors of ground transport. So recently there were 2 pretty big transactions in alternate accommodations. Of course, Expedia's privatization of HomeAway for $1.x billion. And after Hyatt had invested in One Fine Stay, Accor acquired that OTA for very high-end vacation rentals. So those are 2 examples where startups, went mainstream, so to speak. And in the United States, Avis Rent-A-Car bought Zipcar, but hasn't gotten that much leverage. So do you see the same category happening where major OTAs or major car suppliers start to play it bigger and bigger in the space?
Well,
I guess by your reactions.
Well,
I
we're
guess
funded by Cars on Rent.
Yeah.
Cars on Rent has
Which
been
is a franchisee of Hertz, right?
which used to be a
Oh,
franchisee for us, but now it's a Indian car rental brand, and the entire beginning of Miles happened because of Cars on Rent. So for us, it has worked out really well. It's helped us scale. It's helped us take a lot of the learnings.
yeah.
It helps you make lesser mistakes through your journey. So I think those things have happened from us right from the beginning, and I do see that happening with a lot of other players as well.
Yeah, but the numbers are compelling. I think there's over, I forgot how many cars on planet Earth. I've seen the number. It's about how many billion. But
That
the
says a lot.
average occupancy rate is estimated at 4%.
that's correct.
4%.
Single
So
digit, yeah.
if you look at all this capital resource, right? So
Very
the policy driving issues are unbelievable. You have efficiencies, you have job creation, you have security, you have safety, you have traffic congestion, you have parking relieving. So it's really pretty compelling. How do you see these policy issues driving this space?
I think what you're seeing now with the consciousness around pollution levels in Indian cities, I think policy is definitely going to push things like ride sharing and carpooling in that direction, and hopefully even remain favorable to the idea of actually private companies coming in and opening up the license Raj that has existed in this space.
Are these policy issues a big part of BlaBla and Miles' pitch? Or?
So I think what you said, right, that a 4% is what is the usage of a car. The 96%, it's
Yeah.
probably standing somewhere.
Idle.
And also in terms of number of people in a car, I think the number is about 1.6 in Europe, and I know on a BlaBlaCar it goes up to 2.7.
Right.
So when we are able to increase usage of a car by about 66%, right, the benefit on environment, congestion, all of that is obvious. I think what we see from a regulatory standpoint is I think a lot of regulators still are trying to understand what this is in our case, which is peer-to-peer ride sharing, and what this is not, because the taxi aggregator space is so large that they tend to confuse a taxi aggregator with ride sharing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a favorable bent in terms of supporting something like ride sharing, and I see that a lot in India. But I think it's at a stage where people are still trying to understand what this is and what this is not at a regulatory level.
And do you think it's the green thing on pollution? Do you think it's the congestion thing, job creation? Do you have any sense which one's leading the
I
charge?
think at this point in time, they're worrying about the green and the congestion
Yeah,
more
exactly.
than
You-
than job creation.
You have traffic
but
congestion problem in India? I didn't know that, really.
We're solving it. We're solving it.
Although I was glad to see they finally took I remember when they built the highway and then the toll went in. But I was glad to see they finally took the
You have to
toll
go to
out.
Bangalore.
Worse?
Oh yeah.
Or you still have the tolls?
Bangalore.
It's worse. The traffic.
worse, yeah.
Bad.
But I think, with Uber leading the charge, and that's why he couldn't be with us today. He's, I just spoke to him. He's down at the, the transport ministry. I can only imagine what that's like. But the argument's pretty compelling about the positives there would be. The other thing I was going to ask is, we have all these categories. So I'm on the board of Blackplane in Berlin, which is, they go to Great Lanes. It's scheduled professional drivers, right? So you have these two operative words, scheduled and professional, whereas Uber is real time and except for BlaBlaCar, not professional. And then you have self-drive, and then you have carpool, and then you have taxi and rickshaw, and on and on and on. And I guess when categories burgeon, each one of these little silos starts to develop. But how do you see the blurring and the overlapping happening?
I think I can speak for our consumers. We've seen people try out new categories as and when they've come in. I see a lot of people who used to come to our office using an Uber or Ola who have now switched to taking a shuttle because it's still a professional service at 1/4 the price. I think what's happening on the intercity side is also very interesting because you see train travel in India was so big because that was the only semi-efficient alternative that we had. At least the service was efficient.
That's not an adjective I would use to describe Indian trains, but
right.
okay.
I think at the price points you could travel by train in India, you didn't have any alternatives, right?
Economical, yes.
Which is why when you published your first report, rail was probably what, a quarter of the online travel market size. I think it's still pretty still a pretty
But
large
that's when I
component.
learned India Rail was the largest private company in the world, or something like that.
It's the second largest e-commerce site in the world.
Now.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the possibilities on intercity are very exciting in terms of what can be done as a combination of ride sharing, managed, or
So you
self-drive.
think it will be more blurring?
But that's what helps us to even operate in such blurred lines, right? Because we have such huge numbers, we're able to find audiences. So while to begin with, the value proposition and the way of acquiring that consumer may be expensive, and there's a lot of awareness needed. But eventually, the consumer finds the space that they want to associate with. So a ride-sharing consumer would probably not use car sharing, or somebody would use a car. Pick up a car from us and ride share it on your platform, or something like that will also happen.
I was saying to Sakshi earlier, I had some visitors from Europe, and I was talking about self-drive and how it's come in India and all of that. They said, but it's launching in the US in 10 years. So you have it in India? So, I mean, I was like,
Autonomous
you're talking
cars,
about self-driving cars. We're talking about So the point I'm trying to make is, I think...
Yes, it's a big deal if the person
that's
needing the
coming
travel
already.
actually has his hands on the steering wheel. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot of, and especially in our case, intercity travel is quite painful in India still.
Yeah.
And I think what various models are doing is addressing that problem. In our case, like Aloke was saying, we are saying, listen, you can't get a train ticket because it's waitlisted, so go on a BlaBlaCar, for example.
Yeah.
Or, you guys are saying on a weekend, why own a car,
Take a car.
rent it from us or take it from us or something like
That's
that.
happening as
An
well.
interesting angle here is I spent a lot of time in Germany. I was talking to Sakshi yesterday, where the automobile manufacturers have taken a big role in this category. And BMW has a business called Drive Now, and Daimler has Car2Go. For those of you who don't know, on the app, you can find an automobile. And I should go one step back. Daimler and BMW have made arrangements with all the large city parking municipalities. So these cars can be parked anywhere legally on the street.
So in fact, that's
Doesn't need a
something
permit.
that's one of the things that we did with some manufacturers here as well. So the Tatas, we brought in a fleet of theirs onto our platform and shared it across individuals.
Right, but I guess you have a park. Where do they park?
So that's what we were doing. We were creating, that sort of an ecosystem for them,
So
positioning those cars at business parks and stuff. We also did something with the electric vehicles, the Mahindra Revas. We work with Mercedes on the same. So I think it is. So this business, the manufacturers have to consider it as an obvious extension to,
yeah, I think,
where
I
they're
think
going.
extension might even be an understatement now. So Daimler is also on the board of Blacklane. So what happens is you can just pick up a car, use your app,
drive
it
it out.
scans it open, you get in, you drive, and then you just park it anywhere.
Okay.
And you get charged by the minute, and there's a less rate if it's parked, like if you're going shopping. I think it's 60%. So I asked the guy from Daimler, I was like, are you worried about this? He said, no, it's our dream to get rid of the whole expensive dealer distribution, drive a car off the assembly line, go park it, and immediately is generating revenue at a high efficiency
All
rate. So
co-owned.
really very, very powerful. But do you see, like, there's so many, I could have like 20 different companies here, and each one would look at the audience and say, no, we're self-drive. No, we're professional drive. No, we're like this drive. No, we're carpooling. No. So do you really think there'll be this many
I think, Philip,
subcategories?
we're missing one key thing: ground transportation put together, and don't even include rail for a second.
We haven't even gotten to bus and rail, right?
Right. So if you include bus, rail, self-drive, managed, Uber, Ola, everyone, we are talking about an industry that's actually bigger than everything else that was discussed here, right?
Yes.
So
That's why I don't like calling it the long tail anymore.
right. So
It's
I
a
think
pretty big long tail.
our assessment is like $15 billion at this point of time, right? And this doesn't include rail. So I'm X-rail, it's like $15 billion market. So just the sheer size of it will allow for multiple players to operate. We might have your own Phocuswright ground transportation conference here.
Right,
few
but
years
what I
down.
was delving down is, it seems like each brand in this burgeoning category is in one of these, I'm calling them subsectors, right? And do you see a point pretty soon where these brands will cover different subcategories? In other words, would BlaBlaCar get into self-drive, vice versa, and things like that? Because at the end of the day, you're sharing a common vision and executing on an aspect of it.
I think there'll be more partnerships of those sort. So I can imagine that we are already partnered with BlaBlaCar, where if you're waitlisted on a train, we offer you to take a BlaBlaCar instead, right? And then maybe someone who's taking you there has actually taken a MylesCar, to actually hitch a ride along with it. So,
Right, but,
It's happening.
but specifically, so Uber has Uber Pool. I don't know if they have it in
They do.
India.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
they do.
And BlaBlaCar, so they said, yeah, we're starting to overlap, but we're longer distance and shorter distance. But eventually, it's all going to go on a collision course, no pun intended, right?
I can say for us, I don't think the thinking is about expanding into different categories of ground transport. I
Yeah.
think the pillar that we look at, which holds BlaBlaCar and takes it forward, is this ability to build the trusted community where you can say, okay, across so many millions of people around the world,
Yeah.
I'm able to trust a person and travel with them. Now, what you can do with that person is travel is one element of it. Question
Yeah.
for us is, what else can we do, given that
Yeah.
we've built the trusted community?
To give the audience an idea of how big this stuff can be, Jerry, could we take a look at the heat map from BlaBlaCar?
If I can just add, so this is, the blue dots are BlaBlaCars on a Friday. The map shows from Moscow and kind of pans over all of Europe. So you'll see on the top right the time of day. So at 3 o'clock on a Friday, cars are going out to various cities and it starts to build up. So each blue dot is a car.
I mean, I remember the first time I saw that. It's just incredible. Those are all. Is that available supply or actually driving
Those are
with a
just-
So
customer?
these are people actually driving and taking other people along. And last year, I mean, across all of these cars, we transported about 40 million people around the world, not just in Europe. But yeah, that's what it looks
And
like.
you could do a heat map like this for every one of these subcategories. I mean, it's just a phenomenal,
Mind-blowing.
mind-boggling, right? So there. I want to shift gears because one of the things I love is the.
There's a-
Yeah, there's a question. No, we don't want any questions from him. I've answered way too many from you.
Why did BlaBla come out of Europe? Because this is one thing that's come out of France and not in America. Just very curious. Any thoughts?
I mean, I haven't really thought about it properly, but if I were to just, kind of talk about it right now, I think the reason supply gets created on BlaBlaCar is for the car owner, the benefit is cost saving, which is fuel saving, and obviously on a long drive, you get company. Cost of fuel and saving fuel in the US is not as big an incentive as it is in Europe. BlaBlaCar also, in a sense, came out during the Depression, so people wanted to save money. So it's a combination of, I think, both of those factors.
Yeah.
We are not in the US even now.
One of my favorite topics is product innovation because none of you are the actual supplier per se of the vehicles, right? You're intermediaries. And this fabulous opportunity to intermediate. I just want to show an example of what I think is some of the most innovative app-related product innovation. Because everyone's Jerry, if we could take a look, yeah. This black screen is so innovative, you cannot imagine. Right? Do they have Jeopardy in? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so that's the one-tap booking that we just launched a couple of days back. All of us have faced this. You land at the airport, you don't have signal, you don't have GPS, you're fumbling with multiple apps, you're wasting 2 minutes, the app doesn't even open, doesn't show you any cars. You're in a train, you're approaching the station. Now the problem is how do you drag that icon to outside the platform of where you're going to be in 5
Let me
minutes,
get you
right?
straight. You just hold the icon down for 3 seconds.
You just
You
hold
don't
the
want
icon
the app.
down. The
Don't
icon,
launch the app.
The icon floats on your home screen. You
So no
hold
matter
it
which
down for
screen
3
you're
seconds.
on, it's always there.
It's always there. It books the nearest, cheapest cab because that's what 80% of Indians want, and you're done in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Right.
So Phocuswright's a research company, so I love to do polling. So just clap if you think from a product innovation perspective, that's pretty pioneering. Yeah. Okay, thanks. And I wonder how many other companies in different categories can take this, hold it down for 3 seconds, and something happens. You know, it's quite phenomenal. Speaking of product innovation, I have this Amazon analogy question. So even my kids, they're 28 and 29 or 27 and 29, and I tell them, you know, when Amazon launched, and for several years, they just sold books. And they go, what? I said, yeah, it was just books, right? How quickly things change. So I wonder, like, in this category with Uber at the lead, do you think there'll be a day where all the stuff you're pioneering, like the like books were to Amazon as ground transport will be to, say, Uber and these other categories, where there'll be a day and we'll look back and go, you know, like BlaBlaCar, Uber, Miles, they just did cars. Really? I don't. Do you think that's going to happen?
Interesting.
Obviously, I do. That's why I'm asking the question.
We're a meta player.
So he's already not doing
as long as
cars.
we have 2 or more companies, we exist.
Yeah.
No, but I'm assuming, I mean, all of us are doing very small parts of it. So it's possible that a lot of us start doing, you know, the multiple service providers, which Aloke has already reached. But I don't know if we'll be doing the same
But
thing for.
the vacant automobile that's available for someone's rear end, right?
Yes, yeah.
It is the supply side of your offering, but everything on the front end, the UX, the whole idea of efficiency and demand and aggregation. What I'm asking is, could you plug other vacant
Transport
material supply
Can I
into
say
your
so-
equation?
For sure.
One of the opportunities I see is that if you look at the rest of online travel, except for ground transportation, we're sitting on a lot of intent data, right? We know who gets to what airport, what railway station, what bus station, at what time, which day, etc. Right? There's a lot of synergy with everything that the other companies are doing, right? And I think if you just look at the opportunity on the supply side to optimize based on the intent data that's available, I don't think we've even tapped that yet.
Yeah, that's why I use the Amazon question. I think in a few years, and I don't even think consolidation is almost the right word because that's just sort of too simplistic. But I think there's so many companies out there leveraging technology, exploiting the fact that there's expensive material things in the world that are underutilized and needs. Lee showed, like, if my daughter lives in San Francisco, so it's hyperbolic there. But I really think the biggest wave in transformation in this category is sort of yet to hit us.
So I think from a sharing perspective, I see a lot of integrations happening below the value chain and above the value chain from the car. So, you know, we expect bikes and, bikes and motorbikes to get rented, going down further. And we also expect, very high-end vehicles, supercars.
Will
and
you do
eventually,
bicycles? I mean, I've seen bike rental the same way in Germany, where there's a little device and you use your phone
and
and
you're
the lock
able to do
unpops.
it. We would totally do it because it's again, something
When?
that, well, not immediately because right now there are too many cars in the cities and we're trying to solve, everybody from Delhi is trying to solve the car problem in the city. But yes, immediately after, I mean, we would like to do bikes. We would like to do bikes. We would like to do, going forward, we would like to do supercars as well. I think that's a space that's not been taken up.
And what about buses
the
and vans for BlaBlaCar? Is that a big part of your business now?
I think in our case, one thing which will very likely stay consistent is, it's about using an existing private asset.
Right.
It's not about, a BlaBla plane or a BlaBla bus, which is not an existing private asset. So I think, like I was saying earlier, I think our move, whenever it does happen to expanding further, will be about staying with that, an
Right,
existing
but
private asset.
let's say you're the owner of a private bus company. You get hired to move groups of people around. And I have no idea anything about that business other than I'm sure the utilization rate is probably worse than a car. So what if the owner said, if 6 people want to go from A to B, why don't I, like, that's what I mean.
I think Didi and Kwadi in China are doing that, right? They
Yeah.
have these.
Is BlaBlaCar doing that?
No, no, we don't do that. It's only cars. It doesn't extend to any other category.
And do you envision it extending?
Uh, I think it could very likely be also categories outside of just ground transport. We currently don't know what any of those could be. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying housing at all, but I think it will be, an existing private asset as opposed to an existing commercial asset in that sense.
In other words, individually owned as opposed
Yes,
to
yes.
a business. And does that make it more attractive because the propensity to want to use it?
I think the reason for that is also because a lot of,
Well,
what
you might
we
have some
built.
legal issues, regulatory issues.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
also, I think what we built is about this community of people who are able to, they've never met each other, but because other people have rated them, they have a profile, so there's this trusted community that we create. And then to get sharing to happen in that trusted community is the core of what we do, as opposed to, travel per se.
Yeah.
So I think expansion would probably be along those lines.
Yeah. And going back to the Amazon, like I try to get people to think out of the little silos. I've heard that most of the internal strategizing in Amazon, worrying about the next competitive threat, is actually Uber, because it's the only company in the world that could empower a retailer to deliver a product the same day, right? And I mention that to people and they go, Amazon's worried about Uber? They're like two different businesses. So that's what's so fascinating about this space. Is this going to be harder for you to keep up with metasearch or get easier? Can you really do this?
I think it's more exciting, right? Because the more the complexities, the more we can solve on the consumer side. Because our focus is largely how do you solve on the consumer side for all the
Right.
supply.
So do you think this is going to be a big part of the value of metasearch going forward?
I feel at least for Ixigo it will be.
And do you think if Trivago and Kayak and Skyscanner would hear and WeGo that they would agree with you?
We could say somewhere in the room.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I think depends on the markets. If you look at India, everything was fragmented from day one. You have auto rickshaw aggregators. You wouldn't find them anywhere. Maybe in Southeast Asia you would. So I think just the diversity of the types of ground transport as well as the number of players is mind-boggling here. Therefore, it makes more sense.
Yeah. To wrap up, I'd like to ask you to switch gears and put a consulting hat on for a minute. I think you've all done that at one point in your life. When you attend a conference, like takeaway value is really big. When you get back to the office, what you can action on, like based on what you're learning in your businesses, if you could impart like a pearl of wisdom with the audience, what would that be?
Oh, for me? Okay. I think, so you mean from the perspective of this conference or, in general about?
What you're learning in your business, what you're learning at the conference?
I think what we are learning in our business every day is to be able to educate the customer more and more. I think we're all, and I can speak for all three of us because we're in an industry that does not exist, did not exist even a year back in a big way.
Quickly,
And I think we're learning about education.
And quickly, you two, anybody?
I think at one point, technology can enable things at amazing speed. Before we launched in India, I'm not sure if people thought it would work. Aloke was amongst the first people I met, and we partnered up. So I think the speed at which technology can enable things, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I think we're living in a world where new things are coming up every week, every day, right?
Better
So I
jump
think
on 'em.
the speed of iteration is becoming extremely critical. That's something we focus a lot on in the business.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aloke, Raghav, and Sakshi, thank you all very much. Good
Thank you.
job.